We're number 40 in chapter 6.
So I think we just finished the story of the sensualist. Is that right?
Yes.
So the overarching theme here is the power of the mind, the power of thought. And we had several stories to illustrate this. We've had the story of like the world in the mountain. We've had the story of Padma and Leela. And now the story of the sensualist, always talking about what is the power of the mind and the relationship between our deeply held belief system and our experience of the world. The mind is the world and the world is the mind. The body itself is the mind grossified. Through lifetimes, it's what it is. All right. So again, are we starting a new section?
The story of the child.
What verse are we on?
40. It's section 4.
Okay. Should I start, Jim?
Please.
Section 4, Balakyayika, the story of the child. Sarva Shakti Param Brahma Nityam Apurnam Avyayam Yayo La Sati Shaktyasau Prakasham Sau Dhigachati. The Supreme Brahman, the ultimate reality, which is eternal, full all around, and immutable, is all-powerful. By its power, one shines forth and attains manifestation.
So remember, you as an ego are not creating the whole phenomenal world. Your body, mind, intellect, like a grain of sand, like a flower, like a galaxy, is an idea in the mind of God. Now, at the relative level, the body you and I have in this particular lifetime, we've taken lifetimes in our spiritual unfoldment to get here. But again, it's all comes about sankalpena, by means of imagination, as it were in the mind of God. Going on.
Chit-shakti tasya deheshu jada-shakti tathopale spanda-shakti cha tateshu spanda-shakti cha vateshu drava-shakti jaleshu cha. It is the energy of consciousness in his bodies, physical, mental, etc., as well as the motionless or potential energy in a stone. It is also the energy of vibration in the winds and the energy of motion in the waters.
So things that are movable and immovable all occur within the mind of the infinite. I was going through a Christian contemplative prayer text with a friend last night, And the author made reference to Psalm 139. Oh God, you search me and you know me. All my thoughts lie open to your gaze. You formed me even in my mother's womb. You, as a body, mind, intellect, are a precious thing in the sight of God. Everything. And we have this word spanda, which means to vibrate. So the winds move, but also my blood flows, my cells divide, my thought life goes by. All of this is the phenomenon of movement, as well as the apparent inertness of like a stone. Going on.
शून्य शक्ति तथा काशे नाश शक्ति विनाशिषु तेज शक्ति तथा व्यह्नो स्फुटमेवोपलभ्यते. It is also the energy of the void in space and the energy of destruction in the perishable. So it is clearly understood as the energy of heat and light in fire.
Yes. So space itself is Shaktima manifesting. Again, a way to understand that, if you as an individual close your eyes, you can imagine yourself on a plateau. Way off in the distance is a mountain. And can you see a valley or a plain below you and maybe a river moving through it? Such is the power of the imagination, not only to create stuff, but the space in which the stuff exists. This is no different. The movable and the immovable, space and time itself come about sankalpena, by means of imagination. Going on.
फलपत्र लता पुष्प शाखा विटप मूलवान् वृक्ष बीजे यथा वृक्ष तथेदं ब्रह्मणि स्थितम्. Just as a tree possessing fruits, leaves, creepers, flowers, branches, sprouts, and roots exist in the seed of the tree, this visible universe exists in Brahman, the Supreme Spirit.
Yes. So again, Mandukya breaks it down a little bit further. We have Brahman, absolute consciousness, which is always one without a second. The eternal I, pure subjectivity. And then that consciousness apparently forks into subject-object. And the first manifestation of that is Ishvara, he who wishes or will or intends, the God principle. It's called Brahma, the creator. It's called Ishvara, the Lord. It's called Prajapati, the progenitor. But within that God principle is the potentiality of everything that has existed, that does exist, and may exist in the future. Just like the mighty oak is inherent in the little acorn. Or if you look under a microscope and you see a sperm and an egg, there's the potentiality of an entire human being. Not only a human being, but a human being that may get married and then have lots of sons and daughters and family, generation after generation after generation. The potentiality of that is in those two little cells. Going on.
क्वचित् क्वचित् कदाचित् तस्मात् उद्यन्ति शक्तयः देशकालादिवै चित्रात् क्षमा तलादिव शालयः. In one place and in another, and at some time or other, energies rise from it, like rice rising from the surface of the earth by the diversity of place, time, and the like.
So if you're sowing rice in the rice field and then the monsoon comes and it's flooded, it looks like, a bog. And then when the heat is right, the light is right, seemingly like magic, shoots of rice arise. So also, everything in the universe is there in potentiality. And when the conditions are right, then they arise and come into manifestation. An idea whose time has come, a condition whose time has come. And it may not be what you and I would call good or bad, but I tell you it's perfect. How do I know that? Because it is. It's happening. Nobody else did it but the infinite. According to his laws. According to his laws. I was talking with a kid who is reasonably recently sober, about 14, 15 months. And he was a bit of a rascal. He had these ideas that a kind of impoverished entitlement, if it's a bureaucracy, if it's a corporation, they don't need the stuff, so I can steal it. He had a long history of sticky fingers. Goes to a hotel in Nepal and then welches on the bill and just leaves. And about 2-3 weeks ago, outside his sister's home, his motor scooter got stolen. Now, I'm a yogi. What goes round comes round. We don't get away with anything in this life or lives to come. Drop the pebble in the pond, the ripples go out, they hit the shore, they come back. The dharma of the body is karma. Now, interesting point. I'm reading this book by Martin Laird, who's an Augustinian priest, teaches early church history at Villanova. And he uses this marvelous example at the beginning of one chapter about these people in prison for all sorts of crimes, long-term sentences. And they learn contemplative prayer, centering prayer, which is meditation. And all of a sudden, the prison cell becomes a monastic cell. Same four walls, but the experience is profoundly different. So the force of karma can be blunted. Doesn't mean we don't get the inevitable results of the past actions at the level of the body. But whether we suffer over it or not, another story. All right, going on.
प्रपञ्चोत्पत्तिरेवं हि बालकाख्यायिकाक्रमात् राजपुत्रात्रय सन्ति शूरा असति पत्तने. The origin of the world is indeed like this, in the manner of a tale narrated to a child by the mother. There are three brave princes in a non-existent city.
Okay, so what we're having is a fairy tale related to a child. And here we have the power of imagination to create a story. So we have this story. There are three brave princes, and where are they again?
In a non-existent city.
Yes. Camelot, Camelot. Going on.
द्वौ न जातौ तथैकस्तु गर्भ एव हि न स्थितः एकदोत्तम अलाभार्थं निर्गत्य फलशालिनः ददृशु गगने वृक्षान् भुक्त्वा स्वादु च तत्फलं सरित्तित्रतयम् आसेदु पथि कल्लोलमालितम्. Of these three, two were never born, and the other one never indeed was stationed in a womb. Once, having gone out with the object of acquiring the best, they saw in the sky trees possessing fruits, and having eaten those sweet fruits, they reached three rivers crowned by large waves on the way.
Yes. So it's a fantasy. Now, just because it's like a fairy tale given to a child doesn't mean it doesn't happen to you and me. What pops into my mind is back when Hillary Clinton was running for president. There was all these stories about she was in a child pedophile ring in the basement of a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. Remember that story?
Yes.
Mhm.
And this poor guy shows up with a gun. He was a good person with an earnest desire to rescue abused children because he believed a story. So the child is entertained with the fairy tale. But you and I hear stories all the time. And we take them as real. Going on.
Tatraika पुरुषुष्कैव मनागप्यम्बुनद्वयोः तत्र स्त्रात्वा जलक्रीडां कृत्वा पीत्वा पयस्ततः. There, one was completely dry, and there was not even a little water in the other two. Having bathed there, and sported in the water, and having drunk the water, ...
Okay, so it's going on. So now here they are in a moat that has no water, and they're sporting and drinking the water. Going on.
आसेदुस्ते दिनस्यान्ते भविष्यन्नगरं त्रयः ददृशुस्तत्र रम्याणि त्रीणयेते भवानि च. The three reached a city about to be or to be created in the future at the end of the day. There they saw three beautiful mansions.
Going on.
Ekam nirbhiti nistambham anutpannam grihadvayam प्रापुस्थालीत्रयं तत्र tapta kanchana kalpitam. One was without walls and pillars, the other two houses were not produced, that is, were non-existent. There they obtained 3 pans or vessels made of melted gold.
So again, over and over again, the idea of these things exists, but the materiality of these things does not exist. They exist as an imagined form, but they're not real. Going on.
Tatra karparatam yate dve eka churnatam gata tasyam dronatrayam pakvam nyunam dronatrayena tu. Of these, 2 were in pieces and the other one was powdered. In that 3 measures of rice less 3 measures were cooked.
So they've got a pan that doesn't exist, and they put 3 measures of rice minus 3 measures of rice, meaning nothing. So they cooked the nothing. Going on.
Annam prapya dvijair bhuktam nirmukhai bahu bhojibihi avishtam tato bhuktva raj putrotrayo hite sukham eva sthita tatra mrigayavya vaharinah. Obtaining that food, it was eaten by brahmanas without mouths, eating much. Then those 3 princes, having eaten the remnants, stayed there happily engaged in hunting.
So they serve the rice that's no rice to Brahmins who don't have mouths, and they get the prasad, the leftover. There must have been a lot, because the Brahmins with no mouths couldn't eat very much. Going on.
Dhatya hi kathita metam nirvichar dhiya yatha balo nishchayamayati vicharojhi tachetasam iyam sansara rachana vyavasthiti mupagata. Just as a child attains conviction in this tale narrated by the mother due to a thoughtless or unreflecting mind, this creation of worldly life too has assumed existence to those from whose minds reflection or inquiry has left or dropped.
Yes. So, all this world for you and me in a state of ignorance is nothing but deeply held conviction, habituated thought that's sunk into the unconscious. I had a conversation with a person who has a completely different view of the politics going on today than I. We talked for about an hour and 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And he kept saying to me, well, you're in an information bubble. Jim, everything you think is not true. It's all lies. And it was just fascinating. Being a yogi, I'm perfectly willing to admit everything I know about the world right now could be completely wrong. Sometimes I hope it is. But one of the greatest enemies to the spiritual life is certainty. And by this, I mean certainty about the world, certainty about mental images. Question. Always question. Doubt. This is a good kind of doubt. Now, a caveat here. I would not suggest that you doubt the scriptures. You want to have a skeptical mind, not a dismissive mind. Be skeptical. Take them as spiritual hypotheses. Question, investigate, inquire. Never trust certainty. Be certain about no certainty. Don't believe your own mind. Very important thing in the spiritual life. It's also important if you're going to have meaningful dialogue with other people. But too many of us walk through the world. I may not be right, but I'm always certain. That makes it difficult. And we have certainty about the reality of the body, the reality about the individuality, certainty about the nature of the world. And of course, the world isn't certain. And we get panicked and fearful and controlling and all those things as a result. Any thoughts about this?
It sounds like the dream state, where we experience the dream world, and we believe it while we're experiencing it, and we never question it while we're experiencing it.
Well, that's the state of spiritual ignorance. You're absolutely right. But what the scripture is wanting us to do is question while you're in the waking state. Question the reality of all our ideas, all our perceptions, all our certainties. Investigate. All right, next one.
इति श्री वशिष्ठ संग्रहे भावना वे भवम नाम षष्ठ सर्गः. Thus ends the 6th chapter titled The Power of Thought in the abridgment of Yoga Vasishtha.
Yes. The world is the mind is the world. I go back to Ramana Maharshi's very famous image. The self is like the lamp in an old-timey movie projector. Mind is like the film. And the world that I see is like the images on the screen. All right, next chapter.
Saptamah Sargah. Lavarnopakyanam. Chapter 7, The Story of Lavana. Section 1. Shambarikena Mohanam, the delusion caused by the juggler. Vasishtha Uvacha Swasankalpa Vashat Mudho Mohameti na Panditah Vicharaya Dhiya Satyam Asatyam Cha Parityaja. Vasishtha said, by his own imagination, a fool is deluded, not a wise man. Reflect on truth with your intellect and discard untruth.
Yes. What is the truth as it's revealed in the scripture? First Praman. As it's recorded by the great evidence of the great saints and sages, your own logical reasoning, and finally your direct experience. Reflect on the truth. Who am I? What is this world? How has it come about? Those are the questions that we deal with over and over again in the scripture. Investigate. Discard everything that you've taken on faith. perform spiritual experiments, have a ruthless attitude. See what you come up with. Going on.
Mana prashamane Rama moksha evavashishyate atra te shrinu vakshyami vrittantam imamuktamam. Rama, with the quenching of the mind, only liberation remains. In this manner, I shall tell you an excellent narrative. Hear this.
So, this is not an ontological issue. Yourself doesn't need to be fixed or improved or changed. This is not a program of self-improvement. You do not become one with God. Union is not a future condition. What is the problem? The mind. The mind having its avarana shakti, its veiling power, its avidya, ignorance. Then, when the world of name and form is imagined, just like at night in the dream, I think it's real. So manonasha, the destruction of the mind, does not mean some enfeebled state. It means I've removed 3 ideas only. It's so simple. I think I'm a person. I think the world of name and form is solid and real and separate from me, and inherently joy-giving or misery-producing. And I believe struggle, kartavya, is the way to get rid of my misery. I'll be happy when, it'll be better if. Just those 3 ideas. That's all there is to the world. That's all there is to my suffering. Simple but not easy. Going on.
Lavano nama bhupala asit paramadharmikah tatsabham ekada kaschit satopam indrajalikah pravishya natva bhupalam rajanetam vilokaya ityuktva bhramita tena pinchika brahmadayini. There was a very virtuous king by name Lavana. Once a certain juggler, entering his council chamber, proudly and having bowed to the king, said, "King, see this." Having said thus, a bunch of peacock feathers used by conjurers, which produces delusion, was whirled round by him.
Now, this text uses the translation, it's Indrajali or Indrajala?
Indrajalika, I guess the one who is...
Indrajalika, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a hypnotist. It's an illusionist. It isn't somebody throwing balls in the air. So when they say juggler, that's not what they mean. So Lavana's the king, and this magician, this illusionist comes in. It's Penn and Teller, and he has a whole handful of peacock feathers, and he goes, "King, watch." Whoosh. Let's see what happens.
Tata saindhavasam manto viveshash vayuta sabham rajanam cha tada proche trityasa indrajalikah. Then the neighboring king of the Sindhu territory entered the council chamber accompanied by a horse. Then that juggler spoke to the king with friendliness or affection.
So very kind of passive. Notice in a dream, like things tend to happen to me. I'm not saying I'm going to go here or I'm going to go there. So he's sitting there, and the neighboring king comes and he brings a horse. What's the horse doing in my palace? Let's see what happens.
Sadsham Sadshwame Namarudhya Bhuvanam Vihara Prabho Athani Mishya Drishtya Rajashwam Avalokayam Tasthau Muhurtayugmam tu Dhyanasaktam Ivatmani. King, mounting on this good horse, go about the world. Then the king, seeing the horse with unwinking eyes, stood still for 2 muhurtas, or nearly 1.5 hours, as if he were absorbed in meditation on the self.
Yeah, so the horse is there, and Lavana just stares with unblinking eyes, as if he were in samadhi. Let's see what happens.
Tataste Vismaya Pannaha Yayuk Shranti Sabhasataha Babhuvasau Prabuddhotha Paryakulamati Nripaha Samyak Prapta Prabodhascha Provacha Mantrinas Then those members of the assembly who were filled with wonder became anxious. Then the king, whose mind was confused, became awakened. Having attained wakefulness completely, he spoke to his ministers thus.
So they thought maybe he was in a fugue state or having a stroke or something. They didn't know. But now Lavana comes out of this trance and he speaks thusly.
Rajavacha idam ashcharyamakhyanam shrinutadhya sabhasadah vichinka ahamalokya jalamena brahmati mimam ashvam arudhavan enam atmana bhranta manasah pravritto mrigayam gantum duram nitosmin vajana. The king said, "Hear this wonderful story today, members of the assembly. Having seen this bunch of peacock feathers whirled by the rogue, I mounted this horse by myself with a confused mind. Proceeding to go on hunting, I have been led to a distance by the horse."
Yes. So the people in the palace, they just see the horse there and the king in a trance. But the king's experience is all of a sudden he gets on the horse, Ashwa Arudha. We have in Gita Yoga Arudha, mounting the steed of the mind. Here, Lavana gets on the horse itself, Ashwa Arudha. And then he rides out into the countryside hunting. Let's see what happens.
Sampraptoham aparyantam aranyam shrantavahanah asuryastam dinam tatra prakramya jangalam gatah. I reached an unbounded forest with a fatigued vehicle or horse. Proceeding there in the day till sunset, I went to a rural area.
So he passes through the jungle and his horse is tired. And now he's in a very rural area. Tribal folk are there. Going on.
Tatra jambira khandasya skandha sansar ginan latam dhritva pralambamanan mam tyaktva yata turangamah. There, leaving me, who was hanging down by holding onto a creeper united with the branch of a portion of a citron tree, the horse went away.
So just like in the dream state, he reaches up, grabs this branch, and the horse just keeps going, and then it just disappears. It went away. We never hear about the horse again. King lets go and drops down to the ground. Let's see what happens.
Tatra kalpa samaratri moha maggasya megata athashta bhagamapanne vyosammo divassanayake drishta maya prabhammata balikau danadharini yachitapi maya yattat nanam dattavat hi hasa. There, a night seemingly equal to the period of a world cycle elapsed for me, who was immersed in delusion. When the lord of the day, or the sun, reached the eighth part of the sky, a young woman carrying food was seen by me who was revolving or tottering. Even though begged by me assiduously, she never indeed gave the food.
So we've all had that experience where we can't sleep. You're lying in bed and the night seems interminable, or you go in and out of sleep. And then the next day, he's hungry, he's thirsty, and he's tottering. And this young damsel shows up with food and water. Let's see what happens.
Vriddhi mam meha chandali matto napnoshi bhojanam dadami bhojanam tubhyam bharta bhavasi chet mama. She said, "Know me here as an outcast woman. You do not obtain any food from me. If you become my husband, I give you food."
So it's interesting. She's a Chandala, an outcast, an untouchable. So Lavana, who's a king, is probably Kshatriya. So it would be completely against the caste rules for him to even touch her, let alone receive food from her. But she says, I'll give you food if you marry me. So let's see what he does.
Athokta samaya bharta bhavamiti tatattaya dattam annam maya bhuktam varnajati kula kramaha kenapadi vicharyante mohapaha tachetasa bahunatra kimuttena svikrita samaya tatah. Then she was told by me thus, I become your husband. Thereafter, the food given by her was eaten by me. By whom are the orders of color, caste, and family investigated with the mind carried away by delusion when in danger? What is the use of telling much in this matter? She was then accepted by me as wife.
So we have to understand the historical context and the cultural context. This book is probably about 1,000 years old, and it's Brahminical literature. It's written by Brahmins for Brahmins. And in that age, just like in the United States 400 years ago, where white people in this country thought of Africans as 3/5 of a person, so also in India is the great sin of classism and racism. No culture seems to be immune from it. We know better now. We know it's wrong. but we have to understand the historical context and the cultural context. We don't throw the literature out just because there are sections of it that have racism and classism with which we might not agree. Any thoughts on this before we go on? Let me give you an example in our own culture. One of Mozart's most popular operas is The Magic Flute. Anybody ever seen The Magic Flute? There's a character in it whose name is Monostatos, who sings an aria, I'm evil, and I'm evil because I'm black. So in Austria, in the late 1700s, this was the cultural norm. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it true. So we have to see these kinds of things through a lens, but it doesn't mean that we cast out the entire work because of it. Any thoughts? But we don't, go ahead. Did someone have something to say? No? But it doesn't mean we overlook what are clearly things we don't agree with or believe in anymore. All right, going on.
क्रमात् गर्भवती भूत्वा प्रसूता कन्यकाद्वयं तथा पुत्रद्वयं चैव जातोऽहं पुष्टपुलकसः. Having become pregnant in due course, she gave birth to 2 girls. Thereafter, also gave birth to 2 boys. I became a complete pulkasa, a tribal man.
So there he is, a tribal person, an outcast, a chandala in this village, having totally forgotten that he was a king, and he lives there, raises 4 kids. Going on.
Chandalatve sthira bhute भूप त्वं मम विस्मृतम् एवं तत्र मया नीता षष्ठी kalpa samasamaha. When the wicked qualities of an outcast had become firm, my kingship was forgotten. Thus were spent by me 60 years there, which seemed to be equal to a world cycle.
So the reference here is what happens for most of us at the moment of death. At the moment of death, the mind goes through this tremendous shock. We come into a new body, and frequently young kids will have some intimations of a prior life, but most of us forget it. In fact, most of us forget things we did 20, 30 years ago. But because of the force of the past and the conditions in which we find ourselves, we adjust. The mind prefers the familiar. It frequently prefers the familiar to the good. So you need to know, I am a Chandala. I am outside the caste system. So I am technically an outcast. Going on.
एवं मयि स्थिते तत्र नवश्व शुरमन्दिरे आसीत् तत्राथ दुर्भिक्षं गता सर्वे suhrijjanaha. When I was staying there thus, in the house of the new father-in-law, there was an there was then a famine in that place. All the friendly people were gone.
So the village suffers from a famine, climate change way back then, and the friendly people leave the village to find better places to live. Going on.
Aham dukkhadapatyaistu tayacha sahita shanaihi krishrat deshat vinargatya vishrantosmin tarostale. Due to distress, having gone out slowly from the miserable country, I, accompanied by my wife and children, have rested underneath a tree.
So he too leaves the village looking for better opportunities. They keep walking through this barren land, and then they stop and rest under a tree.
Kaniyan balako mamcha mamsam dehitya yachatah dukkham sodhum ashaktoham marane kritanishchayah tatra kashtani satchitya chitayam patitosmayam chalitosmin javat tavat prabuddhoham ihastitah. The younger son begged me to give him meat. Unable to bear the agony and having resolved to die, gathering pieces of wood there, I have fallen to the funeral pyre. I have been displaced speedily just now, and having been awakened, I stand here.
So he can't feed his children. So his solution is to build a funeral pyre. He jumps on the funeral pyre, and then he awakens inside his own audience chamber as the king. It was all a hallucination. Going on.
Evam shambarikenaayam moha utpadito mama ityuktavati rajendra mayavi satirodhadhe. Thus was this delusion of mine produced by the juggler. When the king was telling thus, the conjurer disappeared.
So the conjurer, obviously a Mahayogi, when the king relates the story, the illusionist disappears. Going on.
Athedam uchasche sabhyaha vismayot phula lochanaha nayam shambariko deva yasya nasti dhaneshana devi kachana mayeyam sansara sthiti bodhini. Then those members of the assembly, with their eyes widely opened with wonder, told this: Lord, this man, for whom there is no greed for wealth, is not a juggler. This is some divine illusion which teaches the state of worldly existence.
Yes. It was a Mahatma, maybe Lord Shiva, who was teaching us the state of worldly existence, how it comes about. So what's the point? Don't take ourselves so seriously. All this comes about like a very long and very vivid dream. Going on.
So I guess the point of the story was he imagined the state that he was in that new place, and then because of the conditioning of being with a woman and having a family, he imagined to be a tribal person, and ended up dying, and he woke up and he realized all of it was imaginary. So that was the teaching, essentially.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's go into the 20th and 21st century. How many of you have done an ayahuasca ceremony or taken ecstasy or LSD and had these incredible spiritual experiences. I remember going back 50 some years ago, and I'd write down all the great insights I had on LSD. It seemed so real. Then I'd come down from the drug trip and I'd look at what I wrote, and it was just nonsense. It was an illusion about this world, which is an illusion about reality. So Lavana had his trance state induced by the Indrajalika, which was an illusion about being a king in his palace. But even that is a superimposition of an ultimate reality. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. All this is verily Brahma. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahman alone is real. All the names and forms without exception. How does this world come about? By means of imagination. The more firmly we hold the concept, the more real it appears to me. The purpose of the text is to shake that up. To threaten the certainty with which I see the world. Any thoughts before we go on? All right, next one.
Section 2. Sansara Vibhramaha, the delusion of worldly existence. Vasishtha Uvacha Chandalatvam hi lavane pratibhasa vashadhyatha tathedam jagata bhogi manomanam atrakam sanyamat manasa shantim eti sansara vibhramaha. Vasishtha said, just as the state of being an outcast arose in Lavana only due to the power of illusion, this experience of the world is a mere imagination of the mind. By the restraint of the mind, the delusion of worldly existence reaches alleviation.
So for Lavana, in his historical and cultural perspective, he had the illusion of being an outcast. But do you and I have illusions like, I was an abused child, or I came from great privilege, or money is always what's most important, or my sexual orientation is the most important thing. Those people have it all wrong. These people have it right. The meaning of the story is all of it, without exception. It's just mine. Going back to this Martin Laird book I was reading, he tells a story about walking on the beach and coming across a person with 4 dogs and lets them off leash, and 3 of the dogs just run around up and down the beach. They're just having a great old time. But the 4th dog just runs round and round and round in a tight circle. And Laird asks the person, why does the dog do that? And he said, well, he's a rescue dog. and his former owners kept him in a cage. And the only way he knew to exercise was to just run around the cage in a tight circle. But now he's there on a beach where he can run up and down with the other dogs. But he won't do it. He just runs round and round and round. So you and I create prisons of the mind based on deeply held beliefs engendered by past experience. It's all just belief. Back to what I was talking about earlier in the Laird book. A prison cell becomes a monastic cell. They come in as losers full of shame and guilt and anger, full of self-pity, and are locked in. And then through investigation, beginning to see that the real prison is the prison of the mind. That same prison cell becomes no different than the ascetic hermit who lives in his cell high on a mountain or in the desert, contemplating God, his own self-nature. Freedom is an inside job. Any thoughts on this? Now, this doesn't mean we want to free people from physical prisons. This is not a rationalization. But if someone's in a prison, they can be free. Likewise, you can come from great privilege, have a ton of money, yachts, cocaine, sex, and be deeply imprisoned by the mind, even though you got lots of stuff. Next verse.
स्वपौरुषैकसाध्येन स्वेत्ते तत्यागरूपिणी मन प्रशममात्रेण विना नास्ति शुभागतिः. There is no happy state without the one thing, namely the tranquility or cessation of the mind, which is to be accomplished only by one's own effort, and which is of the nature of renunciation of one's desire.
Yes. So the first thing, the yogi wants to make peace of mind their most prized possession. It's more important than your job. It's more important than your relationship. It's more important than politics. It's more important than your finances. Peace of mind. Nothing in this world is important enough for me to get upset about. And it's almost like it's a decision. And we come to this through our own self-effort. What is it that we have to work on? We have to conquer this crocodile, this graha of desire, of craving. I'll be happy when, it'll be better if, more, better, different. many, many different forms. Doesn't mean not to enjoy the world. The world is the world. My problem is not the world. My problem is attachment and identification. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Asankalpana shastrena छिन्नं चित्तं गतं यदा सर्वं सर्वगतं शान्तं brahma sampadhyate tada. By the weapon of the absence of desire or imagination, when the mind has gone to destruction, Brahman, or the Supreme Spirit, which is whole, all-pervading, and tranquil, is entered into.
Yes. So what is it that we need to do? How do we destroy the mind? Again, the discursive mind is not necessarily problematic. It's not about getting a frontal lobotomy. The mind is three thoughts. I think I'm a person. I think the world is separate, joy-giving and misery-producing, and I must struggle and make efforts. Those are the three ideas. That's samsara, that's dukkha, that's maya. It's got many, many names. Karma chakra. Here he's saying, don't believe the mind. I cannot think a real thought. None of my thoughts are real, and none of anybody else's thoughts real. Don't get caught up in it. Any thoughts on this one? Next verse.
Ayam soham idam tatme etavanmatrakam manah param paurushamaashritya nitva chittam achittamam tam mahapadame meha yatra nasho na vidyate. This is he, I am this is mine. So much only is the mind. Resorting to the best of human effort and having taken the mind to the state free from thought, attain to that great position where there is no destruction.
Yes. Here he says the mind is, this is he over there. There, this is mine, I am he. I'm a person, there's stuff out there, and I crave. That only is the mind. And it's the destruction of the vasanas here and now. These deeply rooted impressions of attachment and identification. It's considered liberation by the wise. All right, we'll quit here. What verse are we on for next week?
31, 32.
Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.